And today we are looking at the second episode of my third series mix walkthroughs here. Today we will be looking at the instruments of this track and kind of just mixing them in, making them fit well in the mix, and shining them up a little bit. So I'm going to get right into it. We got a lot to cover. I'm going to do it a little bit differently in this episode. I've already mixed everything. I've just bypassed it, as you can see by the blue indicators. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain kind of briefly about everything that I did and why I did it. So it's just going to hopefully speed things up and have this not be like a 30-minute video like the last one. So the first episode that we did was the drums and the bass. Now, the first thing that I went towards in mixing the instruments was the acoustic guitars. So what I'm going to start off by doing is soloing all of this. I'm going to raise this up because it's going to be quiet without any processing. But as you can see, there's two acoustics and it's just a double of each other. So let's take a listen to the first acoustic that is without any processing. As you can tell, it doesn't really fit with the drums all that well. It's kind of flat and doesn't really sound like it's in the same room. So that's what I tried to focus on while mixing. So I'm going to bring this down back to its original volume at -11. And let's go up to our EQs here. And I'm going to show you what I did. I did the same thing for both tracks because they are the same. And from here, you can see I just did some subtractive EQ. I took a lot out of the low end because it was quite boomy. I'm going to bypass this and kind of show you what the acoustic guitar sounded like without any EQ. You'll hear that's very boomy. I'm going to unbypass it. Gets rid of a lot of that low end and kind of cleans it up. As you can see, I took a lot out here. On 124, there was a lot of boominess, so I took that out and then just copied and pasted it over here. So now we have two, and the reason why I have two is I wanted to spread it out a little bit. I wanted them to have a bit of a wider sound. For now, I'm just going to do 24 and 24 just to give it some width. I'll probably go back later in another episode and really pan, but for now this is okay. So let's listen to what we got here. Bring it up a little bit. So that fixes some of our issues that we have. It's still sounding kind of flat, so I'm going to bring it back down here. I'm going to start showing you what I did to kind of give it some more character and put it more in the same room as the drums and bass. So first of all, let's talk about character. So what I did here is what you'll see a lot of in this mix video for the instruments is I essentially created a virtual signal chain. You'll see this is a virtual preamp, virtual saturation, and virtual channel for like a console. And through these three, I kind of created it as if I was in a studio and kind of give it that same warmth that you would get from a hardware setup, which my setup is very digital. So let's kind of go through this one by one and just see the effects. I'm going to once again solo the guitars out just so that you can really hear the difference. Now, something to keep in mind, it's always good to mix in comparison to your whole mix. So I would never really recommend just soloing out instruments and mixing them that way, because once you bring them back into the mix, things will change. Instruments will affect the way each other instrument will sound. So it's always good to mix with everything else up, but just for the purpose of showing you, I'm going to solo out just the acoustic. So without anything on this virtual mix rack, let's take a listen. I'm going to bring in our preamp, a little bit of gain and a little bit of warmth. Let's bring in our saturation, and now our channel. And all that does is essentially gives it more of a hardware sound, a bit more you know, it sounds more like it's coming from a studio versus a bedroom. So that's what I was aiming to do with that. And then finally, just a little bit of compression. As you can tell with my slower attack and slower release, it's just going to be affecting the sustain. I thought the transients of the acoustic were quite good, so I decided to leave those alone. Let's take a listen. This really brings out that sustain, so that's what I aimed to do there. And once again, I just copied and pasted it over to the second acoustic track so that they were the same. Now there's only one more thing that I did with the acoustic, and that was this acoustic treat track here. And what I did here was I added a delay, kind of give it some room noise, kind of make it sound like it was in this same room. So I brought this up, and 53 milliseconds. Once again, I calculate this by, let's go calculator. Usually 60,000 divided by the tempo, which I believe is 112. It's 53.5, and then I divide that by 10. It's just a good place to start, and I thought it sounded pretty good. And then, you know, kind of took down the mix just to make sure that's fitting well, and just adjusted some of the parameters around here until I like the sound. It gives it some room noise. And I just want to mention that I have this EQ here. The reason why I put this before the delay is so that I can control what frequencies are actually going to the delay. So if I was to bypass this, take a listen. You hear a lot of the high end in the delay, and I didn't really like that. So I cut a little bit of low end. It just gives me control over what is being sent to the delay if I put the EQ before the delay on this channel. So that's what I did with the acoustic guitar. Let's take a listen to see what we got. And you can tell that it fits a lot better with the drums and the bass, and it just fits better in the mix. So that's what I did with the acoustic. Let's move on to our lead guitars now. What's interesting about this is we have a couple different parts. We have our main lead, which is this one here, this lead guitar. And then we have a chorus double, which is just a different guitar tone that I use to kind of fill in some of the frequencies and kind of make the chorus sound a little bit bigger. And then we have our solos, which is just a little melody that I play after the chorus on the lead guitar. So let's start off with this regular guitar here. And I'm going to bring this up so that you can hear it. This is without any processing. I'm going to show you what I did to make it even better. I'm going to solo out our lead guitar, and let's see. Once again, we have a EQ here, just a little bit of a subtractive EQ to kind of reduce some frequencies. You can tell once again I have a high pass filter on here just to kind of reduce any of the boominess and make space for the kick drum and the bass. And then just some harmful frequencies we subtracted a little bit. So let's take a listen with and without. So most of the main fundamentals that we want to keep are still there. It just gets rid of a lot of the boominess. Now let's move on to our virtual mix rack and see how we added character. As you can see, there's quite a bit more. Once again, we have the same general idea, just a different saturation module, same virtual channel. However, I did not add the preamp because we were already going through the guitar processing unit. So we didn't want to add any more warmth or any more saturation than there already was. However, I did add an EQ to kind of boost some frequencies here, just to kind of bring back some of the lower frequencies, and I want to show you what this sounds like. So I'm going to add these in one by one once again. So without, with, let's add the saturation. Add our virtual channel. Now let's look at our compressor real quick. We have two compressors. Our first one will be focusing on the attack of the guitar, and the second one will be focusing on the release because I wanted a full spectrum dynamic compression. So let's take a listen to our transient compressor. Really listen to the pop of the guitar. Now let's move over to our sustain compressor. You can hear that come up a lot. And there you go. That's what I did to my guitar, and you can tell it definitely makes it sound a bit more warmer, a little bit more full. So without any processing, with processing. Now let's listen to it with everything else. Awesome. So let's keep moving forward here. The next thing that I want to show you is the lead treat, which is very similar to what I did with the acoustic guitar, just to kind of make it sound like it was in the same room. So I added a delay, very similar, the same delay model as the acoustic, as well as the same timing. I wanted to make sure that it sounded like it was in the same room. Once again, I shaped the frequency spectrum of what will be going to that delay. So let's take a listen to how this sounds. So it just makes it sound like it's more in the same room as all of the other instruments. Now let's really quickly just go through all of the chorus double, the solos. I'm just going to talk briefly about what I did here, because most of these are the same. The chorus double, the point of this here is to essentially fill in what I felt was lacking in the lead guitar. By itself, it really does not sound good, but it does just kind of, like I said, fill in parts of the frequency spectrum that weren't really there in the chorus. Little boost to the chorus here. So let's take a listen. So what I did here was pretty much very similar, a little bit less in terms of my virtual signal chain. I added a different compressor. This is the Monster. It's just a very, very heavy set compressor that really attacks the transients in this case. So I wanted to make the transients a bit more dull so that the transients of the lead guitar still came out, but the frequency spectrum was changed through this chorus double. That's really all all this track serves, is to kind of bring up the chorus and kind of fill out the chorus a little bit more. Now I want to talk about the solos mostly. Now the solo is the same guitar processing as the lead, and I'll show you that I have pretty much the same processing on the solos as I do on the lead guitar. As if you remember, I had the EQ, the New York saturation, the virtual channel, and then the two compressors, one for the transient and one for the sustain. These are all the same, not much different here. However, the biggest difference was that I duplicated them, obviously, to make them a bit more full, and I'll probably end up panning them, maybe left and right. Maybe we'll figure something out for the panning in a later episode. Let me unbypass these. And so the biggest difference was I added two different harmonic processors here. The first one is a saturator, and I'll show you what this does here. I'm going to set it so that you can start hearing the solo. Gives it a bit of grittiness, and you can essentially sculpt the way that your harmonics distort. And you have the third and fifth, in this case, third and fifth harmonic above the fundamental that we added a bit of saturation to, and then we dialed it back a little bit, probably even a little bit more. It seemed a bit intense. But I wanted to bring it up a little bit, give it a bit more a push and a little bit more grit. So that's what this solo here is, but otherwise it's pretty much the same thing as the lead guitar. Now the second one is even different. Like, once again, it's the same processing because it's the same guitar. The only difference is I added a flanger this time. And let's see, let's take a listen to what that sounds like. Essentially just to give it a little bit more character. And let's see, I'm going to bring in both of them and then blend them in. Kind of just give it its own solo tone, its own lead tone, and make it stick out more. So let's take a listen to all of this, except for the piano. We have not quite gotten there yet, but from, let's say, a little bit before the chorus. Something that's also good to note is that I did send all of these to the same lead treat so that they all have this delay setting and that they all sound in the same room. Now, the final thing that I want to mention in this episode is the piano. This is something that I did not originally have in the first kind of creation of this song. This was just, you know, off of whim. I wanted to add a little bit more texture to the chorus, really bring out the chorus part of this song and make it sound full. I guess, for lack of a better term. So kind of just briefly talk about what I did here. It's just a MIDI part, pretty standard. This is the Mini Grand. This is just a stock instrument in Pro Tools from Air. It sounds, it sounds pretty good. It still sounds a little bit digitally, but it gets the job done for what I wanted it to do. So let's take a listen to just the piano. And all it is covering the chords, and then it does an arpeggio during the solo. Now, I'm not the best piano player in the world, but you'll see how it kind of fits in here. And in terms of the EQ, as you can see, I boosted some frequencies here. This has to do with the guitar. If you remember, here, I'll pull it up. I subtracted a little bit of 850 and a little bit of 2.8k hertz. And you can see that I boosted around 2.9k hertz and about 835 hertz on this frequency spectrum. And that's just to kind of give the piano a little bit more pop while there's so much going on in that chorus, make it stand out a little bit more. And once again, I kind of created my own virtual signal flow here in the virtual mix rack, as well as a little bit of boost in 4.8 kilohertz. So let's take a listen to everything now that I've explained everything from a little bit before the chorus once again, and you can kind of hear how this mix has gone so far. And there you have it. So that's what I did for my instruments. It's going to be the end of this episode. In my next episode, we're going to be adding the vocals and adding the final mixing touches to this. There will be one more where we start to talk about automation. I think this video or this song can very much benefit from a lot of automation, as if you heard, those arpeggios probably need to be a little bit louder. So we'll do a whole video on that as well, and I'll kind of walk you through my process on automation. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys learned something. Let me know in the comments section if there's anything you would like me to explain more. And otherwise, I hope you guys are having a productive week, and I'll see you next time.